The worst one is, do my hands look weird? Like,
am I posing all the way?
Yeah. And then I'm like, oh, I'm a harp teacher. And they're going to see that I... Hey guys, today we're talking about our personal experience of performance anxiety. This is Stephanie Clausen, who I met when I was in America in 2019. We went on a long walk and saw fireflies, and I stayed at her house, and it's wonderful to know her. So do you want to say hi, Stephanie?
Yes, hello. I'm happy to be here. It was lovely to meet Christy-Lyn back when she was visiting, and I'm joining you from Minnesota, the other side of the world. I am a professional harpist, and I also teach, and I also arrange.
So what is your personal experience with performance anxiety?
Something I've come to realize over the years is that it's not always the same. You would think I would always experience it in a similar manner, but sometimes I feel just like my hands are shaking when I'm playing, but sometimes they're very sweaty, sometimes they're very cold. And then of course, accelerated heart rate, and sometimes just feeling sick beforehand for hours, occasionally for really big concerts. And I can't predict always which one it's going to be, which is very irritating.
So I found that there have been times when I've been performing in front of quite a large audience and I actually felt fine. And then in like a house concert, I was like so nervous. I could notice that I was doing everything differently. And then it's also different when I look back on recordings of the performance, because in the moment I can think, wow, that really wasn't my best. And I'm like, actually, that was fine. I'll put it up on YouTube. So it's all just such a weird experience. Your perception of your own experience is so different to what you might expect and different to reality. And it's a very strange thing. Do you enjoy the actual performing though? Or is it always like a form of mild torture?
I would say it is one of the most exciting things I do and mild torture at the same time. You have a recital in the evening and you have that whole day to feel nervous about it ahead of time. My least favorite part of being a professional musician.
There was a time when performing, I would look forward to it, but it also felt more like the torture in the moment. So I have a particular memory of singing in the Singing Eisteddfod, and I remember my kneecaps actually like jumping. So I could feel myself shaking. It doesn't feel as torturous as it used to. And for me, that just came from a lot of experience performing and then being used to the feeling of being nervous.
I think it's super important to realize that even as you become a better performer and as you grow as a musician, you're not necessarily going to just feel like this is perfectly easy. It's still a thing where you experience a different physical state and maybe mental state also when you're on stage, and the idea of getting used to it so that you know this is going to be different in performance than it feels right now in my practice room.
Okay, so here's a fun idea I had. I knew that Stephanie and I both have videos of ourselves performing in actual live performances on YouTube. And I thought it would be fun for us to show a little clip of a few performances, one or two, and for us to say how we were actually feeling. Because sometimes you see someone performing and it seems like everything's amazing, but inside is where the nervousness happens. So you said you had one or two like that, Stephanie. Tell us about it.
Sometimes I think for a live performance, you know, the audience is never going to remember all my mistakes. But if you know it's going to be recorded and put on YouTube, you think
the camera remembers.
Yes, any mistake I make, it will be immortalized. So yeah, in this particular video, I was very nervous. I was playing a tango, which has a lot of pedal changes and very technical. And I just decided early on when I was performing that I don't enjoy watching people that look nervous. And so I decided I want to try and not look nervous. So I kind of trained myself when I make a mistake, just smile. But now my dad always says, anytime I'm smiling, I'm just making a mistake, which is not true.
So in that actual performance, someone from the outside might see you just playing beautifully, but inside you were actually very nervous. How were you feeling at the time? What was the exact feelings?
Oh, hands shaking for sure is a big one for me. And then also when I'm nervous, I have this habit of looking back and forth between my music and my strings with my whole head, which makes everything worse because you have so much to keep track of. And so it's good if you're nervous to just keep your head still. Don't do this.
Okay, so the first one I want to mention for myself is actually my first ever performance when I had started learning to play the harp. I was very brave. I'd only been playing for a few months, but I wanted to sing and play, and I had an opportunity to play at a music club. So I think I'd been playing harp for 3 months, and there's a video of me singing and playing. And I specifically remember 2 things. The one is that my hands were shaking, and the other is I'd been coughing a lot during the week, and I think also I was a bit out of breath. And so I felt in the moment like my voice wasn't like it should have been at all. And then when I went back and looked at the video, you can see now you wouldn't know. So I was feeling terrified, but you can't see it from the video, so that's nice. Then there was a question from somebody who had a performance experience go horribly wrong, where she was so upset after performing because it wasn't anything like she expected. I think she messed up completely. It was quite traumatic, and she was considering stopping playing harp. I think it was her first performance ever, but it went so badly. I don't know the details, but it was really bad. So what would you say to someone like that?
My heart goes out to you. I've definitely had a performance like that, actually, where I was at a paid gig and I just made a phenomenal mistake. And it was actually my pedals were in the wrong place. So I was playing all the right notes. And the sounds that were coming out were just disastrous. And I was just mortified. But I think that when something like that happens, you need to really think about, why am I playing harp? Is it so that I can perform perfectly? Or is it because you really love the instrument, you love the music? And I'd say that's worth trying again for the sake of your love of that instrument and wanting to share that with other people. And also there's this element of needing to forgive yourself for having made mistakes. It's not like it's a sin or anything to make mistakes, but just giving yourself grace. Oh, and I once heard wonderful advice, that when you're critiquing your own experience or your own performance, you should critique it in the same way that you would critique a friend's. So don't speak harshly to yourself in a way that you would never speak to a friend. Give yourself grace.
Being kind to yourself.
Yes, it's so important because you consider other people's feelings when giving feedback, but you should also consider your own feelings when giving feedback.
Yeah. If you heard somebody playing the harp really badly in a performance and you could tell they were nervous, you wouldn't tell them to stop playing.
No, never. It's very courageous, like you were saying, very courageous to play for people, and it does take bravery. It's difficult. It's something to be applauded. This kind of ties in to what I wanted to ask you earlier, which is, do you feel like you have a tendency to imagine your audience thinking bad things about you as you're performing? Does that ever happen to you?
Trying to think. I think that's probably one of my strengths that I can't really explain. I think there's a certain level of, I almost want to call it arrogance, that has really helped me because I usually think I'm awesome.
That is so good. No, that is good.
So I think that's why I was able to consistently put up YouTube videos, why I've been able to perform in a lot of different settings. So if I'm thinking of what that means in a performing setting, like if everyone's really silent, I'll usually be telling myself it's because I'm so awesome that they're like stunned. If I'm honest.
No, I love that.
If they carry on talking, I'm like, oh, they're just so relaxed. Or, I mean, sometimes I've had to train myself in a background music setting where they don't seem to be noticing me at all. I think in the beginning that was actually the hardest for me because it didn't make me nervous, but it kind of made me feel like my effort wasn't really worth that much. But yeah, I think I have a natural default of thinking that people think I'm awesome.
That is a strength. You're right, because I definitely don't have that. And that is something that I've had to train myself in. because I always feel like there's a voice in my head that's saying, oh, this is a boring piece. Why did you choose this one next to play? You should have chosen something more soothing or more upbeat. And then at a background gig, somebody will come up and say, this is wonderful. We're looking for somebody to play for our anniversary party next week, and your music is exactly what we want. I'm like, oh, Stephanie, they weren't thinking those things about you. They were thinking nice things, and you were projecting judgmental or whatever, judgmental attitudes on them. And so it is important, I think, if you feel that when you're playing, just to remind yourself, people love harp music. People are enjoying your music. They're not out to get you. They're not judging you. And just kind of keep that in the back of your head and keep telling yourself, this is good.
And particularly with the harp, people don't hear it all the time. So most of the time, they're not comparing you to anybody else. They're just happy that there's a harp.
You might be the first harpist they've ever heard in person. I thought of another one.
Okay, yeah.
This particular video is from the first piece that I played at my CD release concert a few years ago. And it was one of the largest in-person concerts, solo concerts that I had ever done. And this was the opening number. And so I was there and I was just analyzing everything as I was playing. I was thinking, am I too fast? Am I too slow? Am I speeding up? Am I slowing down? Do I have enough energy? Is it, settled enough? Trying not to look at people. And then also there was somebody videoing me, so trying not to kind of watch her in my peripheral vision.
Yeah, you don't want to see your eyes doing that as you play.
Sometimes when we're nervous, we start to just look at think about all the details, and everything is kind of right here, as opposed to when you're calm in your own house, you're thinking about maybe one concept or one idea or a phrase, as opposed to, is my left finger on the, third finger on my left hand going to the right spot, and this jump feels too big, and does my head look weird?
Or the worst one is when you're like aware that it's going to be a video and it's going to go on YouTube and people are going to look at your hand technique. So do my hands look weird?
Am I posing all the way?
Yeah. And then I'm like, oh, I'm a harp teacher and they're going to see that. Do you imagine or visualize your performance beforehand? And how do you use that?
I don't often sit down and think through the whole performance experience. I've heard that recommended as a good thing, but I prefer to try and recreate the environment. So a few years ago, I was giving a concert that I wanted to just play very well at, and it was going to be at a big stage, black painted stage with a black background, and I knew there would be spotlights on me, which always throw me off. It's so difficult because this is my harp studio. It's bright. There's morning sunlight. And so actually I took my harp down to my basement where it's dark, and I found a light and I put it straight facing me. And I just performed my whole concert in the basement in the dark with that light in my face. And it was
That's so clever.
It was a good experience because everything it looked a little different. It felt different. It sounded different. And I think that if you have an opportunity, if you know what setting you're going to be playing in, to try and see, how do I react when all the lights are off and there's a light shining on me? And one thing I tell my students also to do is just practice having different backgrounds, because harp is such a visual instrument. You need to see your strings. And when you practice in the same spot every day and there's the same exact background, you get used to that. So even turning to face the other direction with your harp, suddenly there's a different background. It can be sort of disorienting, but the more you do that, the better you get at adjusting in the moment.
To practice with your eyes closed is also always a really good thing, because you never know, are you going to get the exact spot that you're used to having your music stand if it's not a memorized performance, or suddenly the light is not quite right on your music. And the better I've got at not needing to use my eyes as much, as it's really helped in different performing settings. For me, I don't visualize the exact physical space, which is interesting because that's what you immediately thought about. I visualize myself messing up and it's still okay. Which seems like such a strange thing to visualize, because I think often people try to think of a perfect performance, or they imagine themselves playing as well as they did in their practice. But I like to be more realistic. It doesn't help me to imagine something perfect. So I usually, and I don't do that while I'm practicing, I'll do that on the day leading up to it. So I start just thinking about what it's going to be like on that stage, or if I know the place, I do imagine myself there, and I imagine that I make mistakes and I carry on and it's still fine. Because then when that happens, it doesn't surprise me.
Yes, I love it. You know, and that is something that I've thought about. What is the question? What is the worst thing that can happen? And for me, I was always like, well, I could drop dead on the stage, I suppose. And, you know, that would be fine.
At least the performance would be done.
I think it'd be more traumatic for the audience than for me. But, you know, so I do think it can be very helpful to realize what are the stakes of this performance. Oh, if I make a mistake, my life will be over. They'll think I'm a horrible harpist. No, you know,
Probably not.
Probably not.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, there's unlikely to be anything really terrible that will happen. Even if you stop halfway through, you don't get through a piece, it's really traumatizing. Probably the audience will feel sorry for you. And in the end, what have you really lost? You'll try again next time.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Okay, that was lovely hearing from you today, Stephanie. If you enjoyed hearing from her, you can go and check out her YouTube channel. There's lots of videos of her performing and also giving some great advice. And if you enjoyed today's video, we're putting up new YouTube videos many Thursdays of the month, so make sure you subscribe. Thank you for being with us today, Stephanie.
Thank you for having me.
It was so wonderful chatting to you. Okay, we'll see you in the next video. Bye.
Bye.